Welcome to Signal, the podcast that raises your frequency. I'm Maury Fontanez.
And I'm Melissa Grushka.
And today we have a special guest, spiritual advisor, Alea Lovely. Bean, are you ready to talk to her?
Super duper excited.
Hey, y'all.
Hi. Alea, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
We are so excited to have you on.
I couldn't stop saying it, how excited I was.
I was on your show years ago, 3 or 4 years ago, and I've been following you and listening to your podcast. And Bean and I have been saying forever, like, we need more people to come on and share more about their gifts and the way that they're utilizing their gifts to just help humanity at this time. And like, you could not have come at a better time. So thank you for talking to us today.
Thank you. Appreciate it. I'm excited.
Alea, we do this little thing before we get into the meat of the episode where we like to catch each other up by playing a little game of cringe or delight. We just share something embarrassing or delightful that's happened to us in the week. And we'd love for you to do that with us, but we won't make you go first. Okay. How about you go last but not least?
Think about it.
Yeah. Okay, perfect. Bean, do you want to start today?
Yeah, mine's a little heavy and serious but not serious, but also. So I'm going to do partial cringe, partial delight.
Okay, great.
My grandmother, who I speak about, we were just talking about grandmothers right before this came on. I've spoken about her at length on this podcast, was unexpectedly hospitalized last week and very, very sick. And for a little bit there, it looked like she wasn't going to make it. And she is like this matriarch of love of our family. I have spoken about her so much. And she's 93. And I sort of always knew, of course, it would come as she's older. But like when that moment came and that feeling with all of us, I was taken aback by how devastated we all were. Like what a loss this will be. But in true Bubby fashion, she turned a corner. The doctors were like, she's amazing. How is she like this? She turned a corner and she's still in the hospital and they're still working on stuff, but she like is coming back. I was with her for an hour and a half yesterday. She's like telling me stories about her grandmother, really getting back to herself, I feel like. So it's both was horrible, but also eye-opening. Like, wow, life is so fleeting. And
Bubby
beautiful.
Is miraculous. She was not going to go out like that.
No, her light is still going to shine for a little bit longer. I know it.
Wait, can you like my grandma?
Really?
Yeah. We're actually going down to see her today because she turned a corner. And so very similar story. She's 93, like same thing.
What?
So we're going, our whole cousins and everybody's going down there to see her to hopefully she'll pull out.
Where's down there?
Yeah.
Wichita. So she lives here. She lives down the street from me usually,
and
but
Alea lives in Missouri.
Kansas City. Yeah.
Kansas City. Yes.
Yeah. She lives down the street from me, but she's been in hospice and there's been some stuff going on. So my uncle took her down there to take better care of her. And we're just, hopefully it's not the last time we'll see her, but it's kind of similar story.
Yeah.
It's so beautiful.
That you can be around each other during that moment.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
And that the family comes together and that I feel like we all shared great stories about her and just what an impact she had on our life. And it was like a beautiful moment for us all being together.
Yeah.
But hard.
And Bubby's just focused on looking good, looking fine.
She's very concerned
going
about
out there,
living
sexy.
Yeah.
Which I love.
Love.
That's what's keeping her so young.
Totally.
Well, Bean, I'm very happy to hear that she's doing well.
Me too.
Yeah.
Thank you. It's been a week.
Okay, well, I'll go next.
Okay.
I was telling Bean before we started recording, like, I'm so sick of our delights being our kids because I just think that's so boring. I'm about to do it, but I have a cringe too. I have both.
All right, fine.
TJ was out of town this week, and that just puts a lot of pressure on the system, like, of our lives, because then it comes down to me driving them to school, coming back, working, doing my sessions, doing the podcast, going back, picking them up. So it's been intense, but I sat them down and I was like, look, we're going to go back to like days when mommy was a single mom. And I need you guys to like come show up. And I have been so amazed at how they've shown up. Like Keon's doing dishes. Raina's taking out the trash. They are really, I walked out. Raina refuses to feed the cats because it's wet food and she wants to gag every time. I walked out, this girl was like feeding the cats their wet food. They have really stepped up their game. I know. And it's really sweet because it is reminding me of so many years of it being just me and them.
Yeah.
And I think that there's a way that it like brings us together. Like that is the fabric of our relationship
Right.
is me being a single mom. So they know how to jump into gear for me. And my cringe is that this morning my bean texted me, "How you living, Biggie Smalls?"
Oh.
And I
What's
did
the
not.
answer? Alea, what's the answer to that question? How you live in Biggie Smalls? What's the answer?
I'm chilling.
Right?
No.
I don't know.
You're
Ollie,
both
I'm
out.
not going to guess your age, but I don't know if you're old enough.
Oh, yeah, she looks young.
Oh, wait a minute.
Are
Wait
you?
a
Yeah.
minute.
Yeah.
Okay, well then
I
you
am
should be
40
then
years
this is-
old,
How old?
Okay.
but I wasn't 40.
Oh, you look fresh-faced, girl.
Oh, thank you. But my parents, because we were raised super Christian, we weren't allowed to listen to it.
Okay. So you
Oh, all
won't
right.
be as embarrassed, as cringed out as
All
I
right.
am. But she said, "How you living, Biggie Smalls?" And I said, "Living large, homie." And what I was supposed to say is in mansions and Benzes.
Yeah.
And I
Okay, there it is.
I was so embarrassed for myself. I feel like Biggie Smalls rolled over in his grave because he was like, "Come on, you're supposed to be a fan."
You were single momming and you didn't have the bandwidth at the moment.
Thank you.
I'll give it. I forgive you.
So that was my cringe. All right, your turn.
Okay, my cringe. I have insane sensory OCD. So I bought these lamps or whatever for our house, and it put me in this spiral of like, we need a new dining table, and it has to
Makes
be
sense.
this dining table.
Yeah.
And I have this hyper focus fixation on decor and my home. Like, you can see the background
gorgeous.
of my house.
Yeah.
Thank you. But like, it's like I want my house to look like no one lives in it. And so I
Makes
was
sense.
going back and forth like with this table, and I could not let it go. I was cringing myself out because I was like, this is not a big deal. We do not need a $3,000 marble table. Like, we don't have the money for that, right? Like, it's just, it's not important, but I could not get my brain to stop fixating on it. And that to me is so cringy. It's like, it's not important. It's not a big deal. Like, but
Well, can I ask you a question though?
I'm still thinking about it.
Is that not part of the way you manifest the life that you want?
However, the way that I go about it, like, it can be very obsessive. It's like I am on my phone trying to find the dupe and whatever, and I'm like, there are things I have work to do.
Right.
So, I don't know. Sometimes I'm like, I can be a little too obsessed.
I totally get it. I actually have learned that that's also a like symptom of ADHD where you hyperfixate on one thing.
Our superpower.
Yeah, totally. And so I can be that way until that thing happens or I make it happen. So I've just decided that that's a superpower and I'm not going to judge myself.
I'm not cringed out. In my mind, I'm like, you need that table. That's the answer is you need to get that table.
Girl,
how do we help? Yeah.
I support you getting that table. Yeah.
I've already said it's it's just 12 sessions. It's like I'm already like per month. Totally. That's fine. Like, that's not a big deal.
Yeah, you've got it. You're good. Get that table, girl.
My husband is mad.
Well, I will say, looking at your background, it looks like one of those fake Zoom backgrounds that people put up.
That's hilarious.
That they live in a nice house.
I leave to go like turn the AC on or something, and people go, "Oh, I thought that was the background."
Yeah, exactly.
That's a compliment. Thank you.
It looks. The only thing that lets you know it's legit is that it says "Spiritual Shit," which is the name of your podcast behind you.
Oh, that's cute.
Yeah,
let's do that.
Okay, let's get into this. I mean, I know you, but people need to get to know you. So
I don't know her.
Right, that's true. Bean does not. Tell us a little bit about you, and I think specifically. I think our listeners and I'm really interested in, you're a spiritual advisor. What does that mean? And how did you come to be a spiritual advisor? What's your journey?
Well, to me, spiritual advising has everything to do with helping people become more empowered, because there's nothing to me more spiritual than people being able to know themselves. And it's not all about like being a guru or anything like that. Like, that's like the last thing I want to be. But like helping people know themselves. Like, what does it mean to know yourself? What does it mean to peel off the layers of the crap that we, pile on throughout our whole life, and understanding and knowing ourselves then reveals to us our intuition. To me, intuition is not something that we're gaining, or like, it's not a skill we're developing necessarily. It's more about like what we're pulling away, that we've told ourselves like, oh, we can't do that, or I don't know anything, or I'm afraid to get it wrong, things like that. So being able to start from the ground up, helping people feel empowered in who they are and make the decisions that are going to be best for their life. That to me is like all of it. But how did I become a spiritual advisor? So I was growing up really religious, super religious, and very curious from a very young age. I had a lot of spiritual experiences as a child where I would see angels and people, creepy people walking into my room at night,
Oh
things like
no.
that. To the point when I was like 10 years old, my dad was, it was this crazy situation where someone walked into our room. I thought it was my mom. They had the ponytail. It was the silhouette and everything. But they weren't saying anything. And they walked in kind of like a marionette. Like that's the way that they were walking in. I was like, this is super weird. And then they came and hung over my bed for a long time with this weird snarly noise. Very Sixth Sense, right?
Weird. Sorry, weird what noise?
Snarly.
Snarling noise. Like yeah, like
I
that.
did it.
Oh my
And I was
God.
like,
Okay.
what in the actual hell is this?
Yeah, what
So
in
I'm
the
like
actual
10,
hell?
and I'm pulling the blankets over my head, and then they slammed the door a few times. And my siblings were also in the room, but they were sleeping. And so I was like, I don't know what's going on. Anyway, the next morning I came out and I was like, Dad, Mom was in our room messing with us. My parents are pranksters. So like this was like par for the course for them. We were like,
Oh
they were
no.
messing with us, something like that. And my mom was like, absolutely not. You guys were slamming that door. We told you guys to go to bed and stop messing with the door. We heard you at our door. And, and I was like, that wasn't us. That was you, so we're going back,
Oh
forth,
my
back,
God.
forth. And then I described, I was like, you were walking in there like a puppet. You did this and you made this noise. And then my dad has this look on his face and he's like, okay, I know what this is. I see them too. And I was like, you
What?
see who too? Like this moment, and my dad pulling me aside and says, when I was little, I used to see this, that, and the other. And he kind of gave me this little small history, but they coded it in this religious
Uh-huh.
facade. Like, oh,
Totally.
it's demons. Like you have
Right.
to like pray that this goes away, that, like you don't.
That's scary for a 10-year-old.
It's so scary. So scary.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking like I must have done something wrong. I don't want this
Oh.
gift. I don't want this. So anyway, when my grandfather passed away at 16, he came to me in a dream and he said to me, go and talk to your father when you wake up in the morning and tell him Yadi said hi. And Yadi is what my dad used to call him when he was little because he couldn't say daddy. And so I woke up and I was like, oh my gosh, that was such an important dream. So I walk in the room and say, I had a dream about Pawpaw. And he jumps out of bed and he's like, what did he say? And I'm like, before I could get a chance to say it, he goes, Yadi said hi. And I was like, yeah, how did you know? And he was like, he came to me in a dream to tell me that you were going to say that he was there. So we would know that this was not a dream and that he came to visit me.
Wow.
And that freaked me out. I was 16 years old and I was like, oh, like, I don't know. I don't want to fuck with this. Like, this doesn't sound like
How did they explain that away religiously?
Like, they didn't. It was just kind
Yeah.
of this moment. Like my dad was also kind of, I think, going through an awakening upon losing his dad and like,
Sure.
other things. And so even though my parents, mostly my mom, were still quite religious, my dad has become definitely more fluid when it comes to those things. So anyhow, so like fast forward, I kind of like lost that ability or like was really like not trying to dig into it. I would still have a lot of dreams that would come true, but I wasn't paying a lot of attention to it until my grandmother passed away. And that dream was really intense. Like I feel like this is going to go really long, but
no, we
basically
like it.
Yeah, we're fascinated.
she passed away. And when she was passing, there were, like the process of death can be long.
Yeah.
I was in the room with her and I had at this point kind of, become an atheist. I was like, I don't know if I believe in this anymore. But while she was passing, I was sitting in a room asking like, what happens after you die? Like, will you come back and let me know? Like what happens to make sure I'm not going to hell? Like, just don't want to be on the wrong side of this. And I was like 25, 26, I think. And so anyway, I had a dream a week later. She came to me and, there was this portal, like it was in her house. Like it was this really like fantastical scene. I wish I could paint it. But she was really small, like a child almost, but looked like an adult. It was very strange. And she comes to me and the first thing she says to me is, it's a girl. She grabs me. It's a girl. And I'm like, it's a girl. Who's a girl? My cousin and my sister were pregnant both at the time, but they both had boys. And no one else had a girl until I did 10 years later.
Wow.
So she told me it was a girl. So she met my daughter. And then the second thing she told me was something that my mom did for her during the funeral. She told me that my mom redid her makeup and like, she was really thankful that she spent time with her and her body after she passed. And she wanted
Oh.
to let my mom know that she was there, and she saw that. So I told my mom, I had no idea. Told my mom burst into tears,
Aw.
just knowing that her mother was giving her this message. But my mom's still super scary around stuff like that.
Right.
She's still like, was a demon talking to you? I'm like, that was such a nice message. Like,
Yeah.
there's too much fear there. But then the last thing she told me, she came to me and they were getting ready to take her way through this portal. She's like, I don't have a lot of time, but to answer your question, that, me asking what happens after you die, she was like, it's not how they say, it's not how your parents have taught you, it's not what they say is going to happen when you die. I will be your guide. I will help you. You are a good person. You will do really amazing things, and you will help a lot of people. But it's not going to make sense right now, but just keep the path and I will help you. So I'm getting so many chills. I just feel like she's here.
I have it too. Is she here? Because I have chills.
Yeah. So I just felt like, okay, like I felt that sigh of relief of like, wow, I'm not on the wrong path. Like I know what it is that I need to do. And since then I've had many dreams about her in the guiding process of like finding my spirituality and connecting. I just randomly decided like I wanted to start playing with oracle cards, like 8 years ago. And my mom got really upset because she was like, that's that stuff your grandmother used to do. Like that's the stuff your grandmother used to play with or whatever. She used to hang out with and they called them at the times the gypsies. And I don't know if that's the correct name to use anymore, but she's
it's
like,
not. I know that it's not, but I know that that's exactly
that's what my mom said. I'm just repeating what she said.
Yeah, exactly.
She said she would go down there and they would do playing cards, but they would use them as divination and stuff like that. And I was like, oh, okay, so I'm getting some of this information. So anyway, long story short, like dreams were kind of the pathway into this trusting myself, this intuition and this guidance. And then I went through a divorce. I moved to New York. I had like finally meeting these people that are like, oh, I'm a psychic, and oh, me too. It was no big deal. It wasn't like here where it was like, oh, you're a psychic.
Right.
Oh, really? You're going to hell. Like it was just this like openness that I had.
I like how you threw that in at the end.
Yeah.
You're going to hell.
That was my experience. Like there were people that were like, oh, we can't talk to you anymore. Like I was kind of excommunicated from a large part of my community because of the things I was practicing. So anyway, I found my people. I was able to I went through the novelty of like sound baths and going to see every psychic I could find. And, just like things like that, where it was like I was really on the self-discovery process. And it just came to a point where it was like, wow, like I feel like I've met my guides. I feel like I have an understanding. The intuition that I hear is really, really strong now. And again, like I said, it wasn't me discovering that I was intuitive. It was me peeling off of all of the, no, you can't do that, or no, that's evil, or you're making stuff up in your mind, things like that, and starting to vet that process. Now, I'm a very scientific thinker, even though I do have a lot of spiritual experiences. I like data a lot.
Me too.
So I would go through and I write in my notebook and I'm like, okay, on this date, like a guide told me this, like, and then try to vet it out and see if it was something that came true. But I mean, I was like hitting at like about 90% on, verifying things afterwards when it would happen. So that's when I started my spiritual practice of trying to help other people and connect and practice my mediumship. And then, it really kind of blew up while I was still living there. But then, I came back home and I was like, I feel like I need to do something with this. I really want to find my community, because now I'm back in Kansas City, a place where I felt like I didn't fit in, or where people were looking at me funny, and I didn't have that. So I think it was 7 times in a week, someone said to me, you should start a podcast. And I was like, okay, that's the 7th time someone said this. Like, I think I'm going to take the hint. And in my head, I was like, well, what am I going to talk about? Like, I don't know, like, what should I call it? And I heard just audibly, spiritual shit.
Love.
You were like,
that's
done.
such a good name.
Sign me up.
Whatever spirit guide that was used to be in marketing or something.
I bet it was my grandmother, because she talked like a sailor. So
love it.
It was just this like moment of like, oh, okay. So yeah. So I started the podcast. I found my people, like, as Maury, you've been on the show, just being able to connect with people and in the things that at the time were not mainstream, were not okay to talk about. Like, and this is what, 5 years ago? Like
Yeah.
how much has changed,
Change.
where like
Yeah,
now everybody
dramatic.
talks about it like it's like the most common normal thing.
I
Yeah.
think though
And now,
lots of people in the communities we're in right now are talking about, but I still think a lot of people are like, what's happening here? That's why I think it's
Absolutely.
great to have people like you on to really show that it's not like you don't have to be so woo woo and out there
Mhm.
to be able to be spiritual and practice.
Yeah, because to me, spirituality is just discovering your humanity.
Right.
Like
I love that.
while people associate spirituality often with like crystals and cards and
Yeah.
all that kind of stuff, and those things are fun and those things are amazing. And I'm wearing like several crystals right now, where
Yeah.
like I definitely believe in those things, but I don't know. I guess I feel like my mission is to
No,
to
I
kind of
like it.
bring that down to earth, like
Yes.
make it
Make it
really really
practical.
chill. Yeah,
Yeah.
because like I'm
Yeah.
not walking around in the caftan and wearing
Right.
like I'm saying, like that sometimes
But
like
I
people
like
like this is what's
caftans. Yeah.
spiritual. I'm wearing a
Yeah.
Nirvana shirt. Like
Yeah.
I
Right.
dress like a boy most of the time. Like I just think that there is a way to bring it down to earth where people can trying to find a way that it relates to them and then they decide what
Yes.
that
Right.
looks like,
I do think that that's what the moment is calling for is, what I'm calling practical spirituality. I
Mhm.
feel
Yeah.
like when people ask me all the time, like my purpose is to take these big metaphysical, sometimes woo woo concepts and just help you understand practically how they
Yeah.
work in your real life.
Yeah.
But I'm curious, I know from personal experience that transition from being in the closet
Mhm.
to coming out of the closet can be really hard
Mhm.
when the imposter syndrome wants to break in. And what I love that you said, because this was the same for me, is like the validation of the data was so, so important.
Right.
I'm sensing this thing, and then all of a sudden the person's like, how the hell did you know that?
Yeah.
That really matters. And I'm curious for you, do you still feel that way when you're doing readings? Are there
Yes.
still moments when you're doing a reading and you're like, oh, I hope this is true, and then
Yes.
the validation really helps?
Yes. So what's really funny, I got to a point last year where I was like, you know what? I want to really dive into mediumship in a way that I haven't done before and study it. And so
Mm.
actually,
Oh, wow.
is this a video podcast?
We have a
It is.
YouTube.
Yeah.
Check
Yes.
out our
Oh,
YouTube
Okay.
channel.
So
Good
look at
plug.
this.
Alea,
Thanks for the
thank you for
plug.
this because she needs to plug the YouTube channel in every episode. So
I
I
get like
appreciate
12. I get like 12 viewers an ep. I don't want to brag, but
Wow. Do you see this? Like,
oh,
Mm.
is it your
so
spiritual notebook?
this is not my journal. This is what when I'm doing readings, like when I'm pulling
Oh.
information out, I'm getting these little hits and bubbles or whatever. So I write everything down.
Oh,
Because what will happen in a session often is more than one person will come in.
right.
And so, I also often ask them, don't tell me anything. I don't want to
Yeah.
know anything. I want whatever comes through as pure. So we know for sure this is the person we're talking to.
Right.
But what people forget is that like when we open that channel, like you might be prioritizing your dad, but your grandmother and your great grandmother are coming in too. So there may be details that do not align with the person you have in mind, but other people that are trying to come and talk to you will say something. So I'll do something where I'll park it. And I'll park that little detail over to the side because if something does come in where it is pretty urgent that other person wants to come through, I can go back and refer and go, and this thing about this person is that, and they're like, oh my God, yeah. And then it's
Yeah.
like, okay, cool. Then I'll also have some sessions. One time I had this session where it felt like it was going nowhere. And I was like,
The worst.
it's
Oh,
the worst feeling because
yeah.
it's like, oh, I feel like I'm failing this person.
Totally.
Each new client is like a new interview.
Yes.
And you don't want to be there, like, and they've spent money, like it's just this whole thing.
Yeah.
So I had to build my confidence to really stick with what I was feeling, because what I learned was last year I did mediumship. I did like 8 sessions a day for
Wow.
I
That's
think
so
3 months
exhausting.
or something. Yeah. Like I did over 500 sessions in a very short amount of time
That's
because
draining.
I wanted to see if it was true every time. I wanted to see if like the symbol would come in the same every time. And there's flexibility, but now that I know the symbols and have built my own library for myself, because it's different for every person. Every person is going to have a different library. Then I know the flexibility of what that means. So sometimes I have something called a distance symbol, for instance, and a distance symbol can mean you have emotional distance with this person, you have physical distance with this person, or this person passed a long time ago.
Okay.
And so without that practice, I wouldn't have known that this particular symbol applies to these several different things.
So you are having to build a scientific method around this for yourself.
100%. So I'm not guessing. So I get these symbols, I work with my guides, and I'm like, okay, so this usually means this. Does that resonate with you for that person? That's just how it works for me. For other people, it might work very differently. But in that practice and being able to see that, like there will be times where we've done the session and it's like, okay, it doesn't feel like it's going well, or like a lot of details feel like they're missing. Because I don't necessarily do fortune telling, and I'm very clear about that. Like I'm not doing future stuff, but what will happen sometimes is future event stuff will show up. I'm not sure that they're future. They don't know what it means. And then I get an email half a year later and they're like, oh my God, this thing happened. I just got 2 emails a couple days ago where they were like, we had no idea what this meant. And we just kind of like, she in her mind threw it away. And then when it happened, it was like crazy. There was one session where I kept talking about a fire. And this grandmother, who was the mother of her mother-in-law, was coming through. And and it was just this kind of like back and forth. No, there's a fire. Like, did she die in a fire? And they're like, no. And I'm like, I don't know what to do. And it was like a big warning. And I was like, I really don't know what to tell you about this, except maybe be cautious kind of in the future. A month later, they're at a wedding or something like that. And the mother, who is the daughter of the grandmother who came through, is watching my client's child in a hotel while they're waiting for the wedding stuff to go on. And they had this big fire. And so like they made it out okay and they were fine. But like, and I was like, well, how does it serve them? Because she wasn't able to tell her mother-in-law that particular thing, but that awareness of like what could have happened. And so her making this mention of like, there would be a fire.
Wow.
And so like, I can't facilitate how that works, but just knowing that like, oh, okay, we'll see if I hadn't written that down.
Yeah.
Right.
And her coming back and telling me, and it's like, okay, so it's working. Like even things we can't put in any places, it's still valid.
Yeah. I feel like it's also working to further fuel you and your method. You to get that information was part of the bigger plan too, because I think, obviously you're confident in your abilities. You're the one that's seeing and sensing and like living with this since you're a child. But I just can't, I don't know. I feel like imposter syndrome is such a gripping thing for all of us that I love that what's happening is that your guides are constantly filling you with this information about how real this is for you.
And it doesn't just apply to mediumship. I recently, for whatever reason, when I write, like if I'm just writing, like journaling or whatever, I have this natural tendency to want to rhyme the words. No idea why. It's always just kind of been there. And I'm like, stop trying to make it rhyme. But recently, after I had this insane mushroom trip that was just intense.
We know something about that.
Like intense in a good way or intense in a bad way?
Both. Yes, there was a very, very bad part of the trip, and there was a very, very good part of the trip. But my guides told me humility, like to this. You've gone through this trip to have great humility, because great powers cannot be given to those who do not have humility.
Right.
And so I was learning this like intense lesson around that. But soon after, this is just, like 3 months ago. Soon after, I had bought this book. Where is it? I think I put it downstairs. I bought this journal, and I was like, oh, like I'm really drawn to octopuses for some reason. So I got this octopus stamping to like put on the top of it. And I was like, this is my spell book. I can feel it. And I started writing out these spells, and these spells, I'm not joking. Like I wrote out a spell for a brand new car, because we've been having car trouble for like 6 months. It's too long of a story to tell you, but basically somehow manifested a lot of money to be able to buy a brand new car. And it was like within a week's time. And I was like, hold up. This is crazy. Like,
is
I haven't
it
been able
coming
to
to
manifest
you
like this.
Yes,
the
spells are coming to
head.
You?
Yeah.
Okay.
Like it'll start off like just with a phrase, like just one of the lines, and then it's like, ooh, I should write a spell about that. And I sit down and then have to write it. But anyway, I was like, where's this coming from? Like, am I a witch? Am I a magician? Am I something like that? And what's been super crazy about that is like I've had this super crazy draw to octopuses. So I went and got a tattoo just a few days ago.
Right? Oh, love! Oh God, guys,
so
she
fun.
has a
What's
gorgeous
magician.
octopus
It
on
says
her
magician.
forearm.
But I was supposed to get something else. Last minute, the artist was like, hey, I'm not able to do that tattoo. It's got some realism. I'm more this style. And I was like, I've been thinking about this octopus for a really long time, so I'll go ahead and get that. But the last minute, I had this intuitive guidance to say, you should put magician on there. And I'm like, no idea why. I wanted to put Heka, which is actually the ancient Egyptian Coptic way to say magic. But my
Oh,
guide said, don't put that word on your body. It's a
Why?
very
whoa.
powerful word. Do not put that word on your body. So I was like, okay, well, I'll put magic. And then the morning of the tattoo, they said, no, put magician. Magician is
Uh-huh.
the important word. So me having no idea of why I'm feeling this draw to put this on my skin in the first place. I mean, I have lots of tattoos, so it doesn't matter. But like having this draw to put this on my skin, there was an intuitive reason that feels like it was drawing me to that. So my spell book has the octopus, my arm now has the octopus. And then I got this reading from a numerologist, got this intuition of a reading that I had maybe like 4 years ago. You know how like Google or Apple will show you like, remember from 4
Yeah.
years
Yeah.
ago?
Moments.
This
Yeah.
day,
Yeah.
4 years
So there are
ago.
pictures that I took of my notebook of the notes I had from this particular reader. And I was like, oh my God, it says in here that I'm really good at spell work. And this is why you've had a dark past with magic. And this is how you clean it up. And this is your karma. And I had forgotten about it completely. So I scheduled a reading with him. And the reading happened to land a day after I got this octopus tattoo. And he says, according to your numerology, you have nothing but 8s all over your chart. You are an insane manifester.
Love.
And he was like, you are a magician. Like said it just outright. My husband was
Wow.
sitting there and he was like, whoa. He says the magi, that like the sorcerer, this is a part of your lineage and who you've been as a person. You need to identify as the magician. And I was like, there's no way you could have known that. So I showed him the tattoo and he's
Wow.
like, you know why you're drawing to octopuses, right? And I was like, no. And he's like, it's the 8. It's
Right.
octopus 8. You know, I was like, oh yeah. So stuff
Oh.
like that is super weird because it's like I wasn't thinking about that consciously or actively, but the intuition, the opening, the connecting to those guides, the meaning that's coming into my mind to help me know myself. And
Yeah.
that to me is all spirituality is. Like we come
Priceless.
back full circle. Is like it is to know yourself, to understand
Mhm.
yourself, to know your power, become empowered, and not be fooled by the matrix. Yeah, we
Right.
know we got taxes and all that shit. Like, but
Yeah.
you you also have your own power. And so me leaning into that is not only in the mediumship or the divinations and astrology and so on. It's like, what can I do to improve the quality of my life and the quality of the life of the people around me?
Yeah.
And there ain't no harm in that if you ask me.
No, man.
Wait, I have 2 questions,
Yes.
which are just based on things that you said. One, how did you start interacting with your spirit guides? Was it through other mediums or did you just figure it out yourself?
So the process of spirit guide is interesting because I have always had this voice in my head that was
Right?
been very, very loud of like someone like I have a very loud inner dialogue.
Right?
But there is definitely a difference between my inner dialogue and this softer voice that used to come in that I've always had accompanying me to tell me it's going to be okay. It's going to be this, it's going to be that. So I didn't know what that was until I started doing more spiritual research and people saying, those are your guides. And then once my grandmother passed, and she was coming to me in dreams, I could feel like I could hear her voice. And I thought, well, that very much feels like a guide, you know? So I started the practice of automatic writing where I would because I love to journal.
Right?
I would write out a sentence or a question, and then I would just go duck, duck, goose, duck, duck, goose, duck, duck, goose to kind of clear my mind. And then like there would be like, you could just kind of feel when the words would come in. And then I would write that down. And that was a practice of 7 years. Of just like asking the question, writing it down, asking the question, writing down, seeing what came to me. So I had developed very strongly this connection to my guides where I can hear them in my mind's ear. I'm very clairaudient. So like, it's like I can hear very clearly when they're telling me something, but also in the practice of doing that, of that automatic writing, I learned how to channel. And so like there have been these times where even while I'm interviewing, I go into this kind of trance space where it's just like, bleh, like I can't really even control what it is that I'm saying because I've integrated the guide or higher self's voice into my own.
Wow.
Did I answer both your questions?
Yeah, no,
No,
she
I
has a
have-
second
I didn't
question,
even-
but she's too fat. She's too speechless.
Fascinating. This is what happens, but you are particularly fascinating. But when we have guests on and I find them as fascinating as I find you, my mouth opens and I forget that I'm supposed to be hosting. And I feel like I'm watching a show that I love and I forget that I have to participate.
And then the way that those episodes sound are like I'm pushing Melissa aside and just asking all the questions, but it's really because it would be dead air if I didn't.
And check out our YouTube. My mouth is just like this, agape the entire time. I can't speak because my mouth doesn't move up and down. My second question, you answered the first one. My second question was, are your sessions that you are referring to that you do, 12 sessions for a table.
Which Bean and I will be booking immediately after.
1,000,
Yeah.
like the
I
second
mean, I
she
could
said
read
it.
your mind. I was like, I'm going to beat you to it.
When we got off, I was gonna be like, I'm your next client, right? One. But two, is it only like, do I have to come to you and say I'm trying to contact this one who's passed on? Or can I just come to you as me? I don't have anyone that I'm like, I need to connect with this person.
Ooh, I have a follow-up question to that I want to put a pin in. So please remind me that I want to ask a follow-up question.
Remember, my mouth is about to
telling
open
Alea,
again.
I know you're not.
Okay.
So mostly what will happen, if they book a mediumship session, I will ask them, do you want to speak to a loved one or do you want to speak to your spirit guides? Because it is a different process of connecting. The spirit guides might come in anyway, but the spirit guides are so much easier for me to talk to than ancestors are. So I'll usually start with, if they do have someone in mind, it's like, let's prioritize them because it might take them a little bit, because there are certain triggers that can come through when someone has passed. Sometimes you're reliving the worst day of your life by trying to connect with them.
Yeah.
And that can cause a contraction in the energy that makes it a little bit more difficult to be able to communicate with them, because I use you as the proxy. You are the Wi-Fi router to your loved one. So I use the frequency of your voice.
Say that again.
You are the proxy to your loved one. I use you as a Wi-Fi router. Because I used to do mediumship directly through myself and I got very sick doing that. So I was like, no more. I redirect the energy through you. So if, for instance, you're super intuitive and you're very open, you don't have a lot of expectation around it, the session goes so much better.
Oh my God, that's me.
If you have a lot of grief still associated with it, which is why I tell people wait, 6 months or so after a passing to allow yourself to process some of that, because sometimes it's a little bit too close. And so if, for instance, if someone is past of self-harm or a drug overdose, anything like that, things that feel really traumatic, my guides actually have blockers or blinders for me on that, because I have some people in my past that I've lost that way. And sometimes it can be very triggering to see what they went through, and that can take me out of the space, take me out of where I can do my work. So they'll kind of put a blinder on it and put just a boop, here's a symbol for it. You can't see it. So I won't know a lot of the intimate details that I might know about other people's death. If they passed of health reasons, I'll usually know I can feel it in my body. But if it's something more traumatic, like, my aunt passed away from a drug use. She thought it was something else and someone gave her something that ended up killing her. So things like that sometimes will block me from being able to connect in that way. So it is important for them to prioritize who they want to speak to. So that way, because it can it's like a developing picture. Sometimes when you're looking, those of us who are old enough to know how film works, there is when you put it in the developer, it takes time to kind of rise from the surface. And sometimes you don't have all the details yet. And that can take some time.
Yeah. That's a really beautiful way to put it, that developing picture.
Everything she said has been like such it's such a useful way for mainstream people to really understand her message.
This is why she has a #1 Apple podcast.
Yeah, which I'll also pick your brain about later.
Okay, I have a follow-up question, and I want to get to your book. I really want to talk about your book.
Same.
I've always been curious, and I ask my mentor, who's a medium, this all the time. Like, my loved ones who have passed speak Farsi. So what happens when there's a language barrier and you're reading for someone who has ancestors that don't speak English?
Yeah, well, because it doesn't come through in language, it comes through feeling. So like there's a way that translates to the soul, that like it's very easy. It doesn't matter what language you speak, like it's still going to come through. However, I have had souls come through and it's like I can hear a little bit of the language where it's like, okay, they definitely speak, and sometimes an accent will come through and I'll know that they speak a different language. And if there is difficulty in the communication, they're more likely to give me symbols. So there are workarounds for sure. But there's times where, I mean, I don't speak great Spanish, but words will come through that, like particular nicknames and things like that will come through. Like I have a deep understanding of just language symbolism. I have a communication degree or whatever, but like there are things that can come through that it's like, oh, this is really hard to describe. There are sounds, for instance, someone will come through and I'm hearing an Ian, like that sound. And I'm like, is their name Ian? But like it's Steven. Their name is Steven. So it's like that. It's like kind of like that, like a developing picture, but for your ears. Sometimes I'll see things.
Confused. Can you imagine me?
I know it's really hard.
Yeah, but me,
this is why you're not a medium, Bean.
I would be like, I don't know. I heard something. I don't know.
But it won't always be super close. And then there was I had some a really potent experience. The man was from Iran and had moved here when he was younger. One of his parents, I think, stayed behind and ended up passing away there. But then, I mean, clear as day, it sound like, we're talking right now, but he was like, they don't speak English. How did you? And I was like, I just don't think it works that way.
Yeah.
Like when you get to the other side, like you've had many, many lifetimes, at least that's my belief. And like, I think translating through the soul is something they definitely could do.
Yeah.
We just don't understand it because we can't do it here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a really,
it's like a universal language that the souls speak.
Yeah. Okay. So let's talk about your upcoming book. Comes out November 19th. Did I get that right?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. It's my mom's birthday.
Oh, that's good. Okay. We like that. Meaningful manifestation. So listen, I mean, I know from being in the process myself that writing a book is a labor of love and tears and joy and happiness. So congratulations that is out in the world. That is a big deal and a big accomplishment.
Is this your first book?
It's my third, but it's my first one that I'm with a big publisher.
Girl.
Yeah.
Wow.
Congrats.
I'm very excited.
That's
so
so
I want to hear
exciting.
about the book, but we know that in the book you introduced this Imagine method. So I also want you to tell us a little bit more about the Imagine method, because what I imagine is that this book is about putting this power back in people's hands instead of, I always say, I don't want people to rely on me as their higher self. I want to introduce them to their higher self and then become obsolete. And I can really feel that that's your purpose as well. So tell us about that and how the book helps people do that.
So it's interesting because I was driving, I was on a road trip and it just came to me like it was like a download. It was like, oh, the word imagine, because there is something about the word imagine in the context of it that it is imagination, or whatever. It's like the process of doing something. Mag being the magi, magic, imagination. So I was like, oh, that's really cool. I really like that. But the Imagine method stands for inception. It's like, where are you starting from? Like kind of looking at your process and in your life and like, what is it that you want? But like starting from is really important because the idea, we're often looking forward, but we're not looking in the present of like where we're actually at. And so for instance, if I'm trying to manifest a drive to California, I live in Kansas City. You might live in New York. And so there are going to be a difference in time of how we get there. And that could be then privilege. I have a nicer car than you do, or, you have more gas money than I do, whatever. Like we all have these different attributes that we're born into or that we've worked towards or whatever, things that we even cannot control that will dictate how long it will take us to get to that said point. And so we need to be observant of that because there are complexities and marginalization and things that are quite unfair in our world that we need to not take on to ourself as like a version of our own self-worth or no self-worth. It's like, this is just kind of how the world is and where it starts. Can we have an acceptance for where we're at first before we get started on this path? So then you have manifestation, which is, what do you want? Very plainly, everybody knows what manifestation is, but what do you want? Like being able to clarify what that is, because unfortunately, a lot of people don't know what they want. Right. You need to vet out whether or not it's an inauthentic desire or an authentic desire. Like, are the desires something you're influenced by? Are your parents pushing you to get that doctor degree? Is it, oh, I want that Fendi bag because everybody else has it? Or is it something that's really important to you and means something to you? Do I really want this table? Because
you do. No, you need it.
Symbolizing
keep thinking about
something
it
for my family,
Yeah.
So anyway, like, what is it you want? So then you go into, excuse me. I felt like I was gonna like burp. Cut that out.
Please do. Please do.
I saw a medium once, by the way, who had to burp to get the information.
It's burping and yawning. Yeah.
Yeah. She would burp and yawn a ton in the session.
It's like energy release.
You were like, am I boring you? Is my life
she
boring
told me
you?
up front. She said, I'm going to make these sounds. It was over the phone. What did you say? Why was it?
It's energy release. Like when you're having the energy come through your body needs somewhere to put it sometimes and like get rid of it.
Yeah.
So yeah, anyway, so A is anti-belief. Like why can't you have what it is that you want? What are the things that you're telling yourself? Sometimes those are very real things. Yeah. Like sometimes it's like, okay, I can't do that because my legs don't work. Like things like that. Being able to acknowledge, what is the anti-belief? Is this the truth or is this a story you're telling yourself? Because a lot of times it's just a story we're telling ourselves. There are very real parameters and barriers that can prevent us from getting to those things. But if that is the case, then we have to then grow. So then that's the G. And so like, what does it mean to grow? What needs to happen in my life in order to change? Like, what does that look like for me? So for instance, this to me is a really great example, but I have like body health weight issues, like have my whole life.
Mhm.
Not my whole life, after college. And dealing with that, I'm always shitting on myself about like, why can't you just get to the gym? Why can't you do this? Or what's happening? You're so lazy. Like I'm always saying mean things to myself, as we do. But when I went through this process, I was like, okay, where am I starting from? This is how much I weigh. This is what I'm going through. I'm stressed. Hormones are all over the place. My health is going on. I have a lot of kids, whatever. Like going through and just acknowledging that. And then what do I want to manifest? I want to be in a healthy body. I wanted this. I wanted that. Why do I want to be in that? Like, is it just a healthy body or is it a skinny body? Has the patriarchy required me to be small as a person and not take up space? Like, what are the actual reasons? What am I actually wanting here? I want to be healthy and be around for my kids for a long time. Okay, so there's no weight associated with that. There's something different there. Anti-belief. Why can't I have what I want? Well, like I'm not willing to go to the gym in this way, or I'm not willing to eat in this way, or I don't have the time or the capacity, or maybe I am doing all these things, but there's a health issue that's kind of in the way. And the growth point for me was like, all right, well, how do I get around this? What does it mean to get around this? Am I just trying to have to go the direct route that I think everybody else goes, that because it works for them, or is something else stopping me? Is something else in my way? And I was started to, and this has been a few year long process. So, this is not something that happens overnight, but I had to go into why can't I have what it is that I want? What is stopping me? There must be something more than just laziness.
Right.
There has to be something more than just health problems. I feel a very significant block around this thing. And so I was doing some meditating. I was like really, it's actually while I was writing my book, I started to figure out what the thing was. And I had this flash of, and trigger warning, I'm about to talk about SA. When I was in college, I was kidnapped and I was taken to a place. We were all getting in cars together with some seniors in college, or whatever, this football player. I'm not going to give him too much airtime. And he took me to a different theater than everybody else went to.
Oh
and
my
then
God.
things happened that should not have happened.
Oh God.
So,
I'm so sorry.
Thank you. So me going through that let me know that me being in an attractive body, or what's conventionally attractive, is not safe for me. And because, especially since I was a Christian and there was all this stuff, all these rumors had started afterwards. And then it was like my purity was at stake, and she's
horrible.
someone who sleeps around. And I was like, I didn't do anything, there just being a lot of trauma around that. And I remember that day, the day after, going to the hall, student hall, or whatever, cafeteria, and sitting down and eating 3 Belgian waffles, like just because I was so I was so dysregulated. I was so just feeling, it was a lot. So going into that space, thinking like, okay, my 18-year-old brain was like trying to find a way to cope. Like, how do I keep myself safe? How do I keep myself pure? How do I keep myself from the leering eyes of men who are like, since I developed boobs at 13, always feeling like my body was problematic. And so from there on, that's where the weight came from. It just came on and on and on. And so, and I've yo-yoed, weighted, dieted and all that. But every single time I lose a bunch of weight, it's like, ugh, like I feel unsafe.
Oh, it's dangerous.
It's dangerous for me to be there.
Mm-hmm.
So I have to go then back into, okay, what's my higher priority? Because when we talk about our higher priority, my higher priority is safety over health.
Right.
And I wrote it out and I cried. I sobbed like a baby while I wrote this.
You needed to.
I said, I am more afraid of men than I am of death due to bad health.
Wow.
And
that's something that is just the fucking truth.
That statement alone gave me grace, gave me kindness, gave me acceptance, gave me love to that girl. Instead of always telling her like, you did it wrong, you did that, look at you, you're, all of that. And said, oh my goodness, you've been just trying to keep me safe this whole time.
Of course. Right. In a very non-condescending way. I'm so proud of you for coming to that conclusion in the time that you needed to come to it.
Yeah.
Did you have that memory throughout life, or were you brought back to it?
I blocked it. I actually didn't see his face in my mind ever again.
Yes.
Until I had that moment and I was like, I can't believe I've forgotten about
and
this.
You sobbed for it. You grieved for her.
Yes. Yes.
Absolutely.
So just to take a little caveat out, something I should have said before we got started, but maxims are super important. Like, what are your top 5 maxims to have a good life? Like listing out those things will give you a greater framework for this Imagine method, because each time you go through one of those items, you can use the Imagine method to kind of correlate what it is that you want and the process you're going to go to get it. So for instance, if on my Maxim list, my top thing is safety, well, like there are going to be things that come underneath it that are not going to be as much of a priority. So if they're going to be competing, I'm always going to pick safety first.
Okay.
So if you want, for instance, a 6-figure job, but time with your family is your top Maxim, well, guess what? Like if you're going to have to negate that for time with your family, you might not get that job, and you will think you didn't manifest it because you didn't think positively enough. But your energetic Maxims are saying, I don't want that job.
Yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but
No,
I
go
am
ahead.
so glad that you are saying this, because I don't think that people talk about this enough in manifestation, which is the wholeness of everything you're trying to manifest. Like we can get so hyper focused. And I know for me, it's been my career, but actually my number one Maxim is being there for my children while they're still at home. And I hear sometimes my guide saying, hey, what you want is coming in due time, so that you can also have this thing you really cherish, which is that you are home every day when they come home from school, and you are making their snacks, and like all these things that matter to me that I didn't have, because not my mom wasn't nurturing. She just was working constantly to help us survive. So I just think that that's a breakthrough concept, this idea of Maxims and being in context of everything that you desire, not just the hyper focus.
Right. And the reason why I said 5 is because it's really hard to keep track of like 10, 20, so on. But there are categories that they kind of fit in. So, time with your family, a romantic partner, your passions achieved, travel, inspiration, financial security, things like that. Right. And like, since financial security is the lowest on my Maxim list, like when it comes down to it, it's like, okay, do I take on another client and fill my schedule with time, or do I get to hang out with my kid and have a day off and go to the park? Like, I'm going to choose that. Now, there may be a time in my life where that switches, where it's like, okay, well, now she's older now, and that's not as much of a priority for me. So now I'm going to take that extra client or do the extra work, or, whatever the thing is. But I think that that's super important, because a lot of times people think that they're supposed to be on and manifesting all the time. And it's like, no, this is a seasonal thing. It's meant to be seasonal. You're not supposed to be like, go, go, go. A flower doesn't bloom year round. So that's where we get into integration, because like growth is like that, like what needs to change? What do I need to acknowledge? Like what part of my anti-belief is the story or the truth? And that's what I did with, my experience here. And I had to change it. Growth for me was, okay, I don't want to be skinny. I want to be strong.
Right.
So changing, rearranging like what health and wellness looks like to me. I can leg press 550 pounds.
Fuck yeah, you can, girl.
I can kick a hole in the wall.
Yeah, you can.
And
that
when I go
awesome.
to the gym and I load those packs up, those plates up, and the guys are looking at me like,
yeah, right.
Come on, really, her, And then I'm doing 10 sets with them, and the joy I get.
Oh God, that feels good.
What I get the hair flip that I do.
Totally.
Got my nails on and everything, and I'm like, that makes me feel healthy. I feel strong. So I've rearranged that, and I'm still working on that, because the imprintation of body image and all that is like forever going. But that was a way that I could rearrange my Maxims and manifest something that was actually good for me, not manifesting something that I think I want based on what the world tells me I should be. And that to me is so fucking empowering, because then you integrate it. It's like, okay, what are the practices I need to do to make this a daily thing? What are the practices I need to do to really identify with it? It's the changing of the person. So then you move into N, which is noticing, and noticing are like the synchronicities, noticing the change. Like sometimes the synchronicities are things that you're doing, very active things that you're doing very practically. But sometimes it's the universe being like, I saw you, girl.
Yeah.
We getting ready to bring that man in, little details. It might not be the person, but it's like, you're on your way. I had that when I was manifesting my partner, and it was, what was that day? February 2nd. No, 22nd. So 222 of 2020. I had a dream that my partner came to me and said, wait for me. And I was like, ooh, like that felt very real. That felt very important. So then after that, I, in ways that I had not before, because I had gone to Bali, I'd done the Eat, Pray, Love thing. I was like, all right, I started to realize that I can't attract a partner because there's no space for anybody in my life. I felt like I had to do everything myself. and I'm hyper vigilant, I'm hyper independent. So there's no space for anybody to come in. So when I open that up and says, I'm ready for an equal and capable partner, I'm ready for someone to come in my life that I want to help me. Like, I'm okay to receive help, disparaging the belief that I'm not worthy enough to have help. It was like all of a sudden the light went on and I was visible. And suddenly all these really attractive and very like nice looking men, like people that had things going for them were like interested in me. And I never experienced that before. I was like, suddenly I'm visible. What? So anyway, 4 months later, I meet my husband.
Wow.
And so that little like, I could have gone down the route where it was like, well, they noticed me and now they're, they've walked away and I haven't heard back from them. So I guess I'll never have anybody. Or I could go, no. This is the universe saying you've made progress. We see it. We see you, and giving me that little nod and saying, just, it's not too far away. So just keep the course, basically. So notice
that perception is so important because it shapes your entire reality. The fact that you can perceive the progress, perceive what's coming to you makes it more real, and therefore more of it comes.
Yes. And the thing about, when The Secret came out, and I felt like this is the step that was kind of missing, is that, affirmations are great, like, and positive thinking is great. And all of those things work if you've done all of these other steps first.
Right.
Like, it works super well when you have an acknowledgement of where you're at. You have acknowledgement of your stories and the scripts that you're telling yourself. You have an acknowledgement of your socioeconomic status and any marginalizations you might acquire or privileges you might acquire. And then being able to see it from a different perspective instead of like from a victim mindset. But like some people are actual victims. I hate when I hear manifestation where it's like, how is that, story serving you? And it's like, like I might be in a war-torn country.
Right.
Like, how am I supposed to manifest out of this? You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So that being said, however, some of those people I've seen are happier than people who have everything. So there is definitely a perspective and a positional aspect where what we're looking at can be the most beautiful or the most ugly thing. And we can be looking at the same thing.
That's right.
So that 100%. Does play a role. I don't want to negate that completely, but I do want to say that like in that process, if your mindset is in a bad space, then it's going to be very difficult for you to notice the universe being like, hey, hold on just a little bit longer. We're going to get you over this hump. We're just trying to teach you something right now. That to me leads then to expansion. Expansion is what happens once you get the manifestation. To me, manifestation is a process of learning yourself. It is learning what you want, who you are, and you start that process all over again. You guys know, like you've manifested something. You're like, all right, on to the next thing. Why? Because this is our process of growth.
I don't know. I'm not good at manifesting, but it sounds amazing.
Well, that being said, let's unpack that. Let's unpack that.
Okay.
Let's go
book a session. Book a session, girl.
Planning on it. Already sold.
But if you're in that space where you say, I'm not good at manifesting, right?
Or then, I don't know how to properly manifest. Is that better?
None of the things you're saying are true, but I'm gonna let Alea deal with this.
All right. I'm ready.
So if you're framing that, like I'm not good at manifesting, then anything that you've ever manifested in your life, you won't notice. Because like we're all natural manifestors. We're all natural, like I want something, I'm going to go get it. You said, oh, I want some cookies. I went to the store, manifested. Like that's the elementary part of it. But like, you guys starting this podcast, right? You had an idea and now you're doing it. That is manifestation. There's no proper way to do it. However, there is a better way to do it. There's a way that increases your ability to get things going and utilizing your own magic to get those things to move over the hump. The trouble is that when we're in the expansion period, nobody talks about what happens when you expand and you get that manifestation and you don't want it anymore. Or you want something different, or you want something better. You'll think you manifested incorrectly when you were just manifesting to an older version of yourself.
Yes.
So it's like, okay,
so what do you do then?
What'd you say?
So what do you do if you've manifested?
You imagine again.
You start the process all over again. So for instance, I manifested the child, the partner, the home in a 6-month period, like an insane.
You're really good at it.
But I had been working on that for 20 years.
Right.
And so it looks like it happened fast. It looks like I was bad at manifesting, but if I had had any of those things at 27, oh no,
you wouldn't have been ready.
No,
not ready for that. I was not ready for that.
Yeah.
So even though it took a long time, and then it then went over the hump and was like, all right, you got it done. Here you go. I could have said I was bad at it, or it was just in its perfect timing.
That's right. That's right. Okay, we could talk to you for 7 hours.
Oh
I have a
my
last
God.
question for you.
Yeah.
Oh my, I
Um,
keep forgetting we're on a show. Yeah. Go.
Okay, this is my question for you. We are in a time right now as a species.
Yeah.
We, Bean and I talk a lot on this podcast about the reality of the time that we're living through, of the division, of the separation, of the fear, the hatred. And I was curious, and maybe I'm being called to ask you, what message do your guides have for us right
I love this
now
question.
as a collective around this moment that we're in?
Wow.
Let me check
Great
with
question.
them. Okay. Well, I think a big part of it is unity. We're not just unity, love in general. Like we are so divided and so polarized because we're allowing social media, the news, and other things to kind of swipe us into this fear mode, swipe us into what we're afraid of. When we're all kind of afraid of the same thing. It's just we're afraid of it in different ways or different perspectives. It's manifesting in different ways. And like the way that we're approaching it is that this person is separate from me.
Right.
And because they're separate from me, they want different things than I want. And, like we're looking at our election, for instance, and no matter where you stand on the spectrum, like there's this part of it's us versus them.
Yeah,
when,
for
like,
sure.
when the powers that be, I guess, who run this world benefit from that illusion.
Absolutely.
But where we could really foster a better sense of being is to say, okay, like I see myself in that person. That person is afraid of something. And even though they're handling it in a way that I don't think they should handle it, let me withhold judgment in this moment and just send them love. Because like in
It's
that
so
regard,
hard.
it's so hard, God.
It's so hard.
I'm very judgmental. And I very much try not to be. I do think I have the gift of discernment. So I'm able to say,
it's called discernment.
Discernment is definitely there. But there can be these elements where I personally feel so saddened by how hateful people can be. Like something that really bothers me is watching the comments on social media and the things that people will say to each other. And it's like, would you ever dare say that to someone's face? No. So we're watching what looks like the algorithm controlling the most engaging thing, the thing that gets us the most angry, the thing that gets us the most, I'm going to say something, like the thing that takes us out of our peace and puts us into that action state where it's like, this is justice to me. I must say something to this person. And it doesn't allow us to take a beat and say, you know what, like, that's probably just a bot, things like that, where we're able to remove that anger and send love instead. And so I have this entity that I channel, Erasmus. After my mushroom trip, they were like, Erasmus is just different versions of you. We couldn't tell you until this point, until you knew. And I was like, holy shit, I'm very wise. But this element of where we have been we think that social media is our real world. And it's just not.
Right.
And so they're like, if you're feeling hateful and you're feeling scared and you're feeling all of those things, step away from the phone, step away from the TV, step away from the news. It's not to be knowledgeable what's happening in the world, but not to be inundated, not to be swept up by it, because the sweeping is like, there are dark forces in this world. I'm very, very aware of that. Even though we are all one, there is no dark without light. Like there's no shadows. Like the higher the light gets, the darker the shadows get, right? So there is this duality and polarity that we live within that is not going anywhere. Okay. We're not going to have this, what they call kumbaya world, where everybody is unified and everybody's okay. That's just not how it's going to work. But for us to see that if things feel like they're getting worse, then somewhere they have to be getting better. It's the hermetic laws, like if one goes up, something must come down, as above so below, so within so without, whatever how it goes. So like that element of observing and not just sinking into the fear. Bad news travels faster than good news does, right?
Totally true.
So we then surmise that this is our whole world and this is what's happening, but we forget there are also really amazing things happening on the other side.
That's right.
So if we can kind of turn our attention another way and say, okay, how can I infuse this with love instead? That is the question that I've been asking myself over and over every time I encounter someone being hateful or ridiculous or belligerent. And I'm like, I'm going to hold my tongue. How can I infuse love here instead? How can I infuse empathy? How can I infuse, and it sounds like I'm a saint. I'm not, but like there being that consciousness of just what does it mean to infuse love? And in this way, we are activating our own power.
Yeah.
Because I believe, like, as a collective, our strongest power is love.
You're
Like,
right.
at the point of even being here, collectively speaking, when I do mediumship, the one thing that comes through every single time is I love you. I love you. They are our loved ones. Why do we want to connect with them? Why is it that when someone we love passes away, we feel so much grief?
So much
It is
love.
the absence of the love. There's nowhere to go. So like our purpose is love, to be here in love, to connect with people in love, to give our love, to receive love. And when we're not doing that, we're not activating our purpose. So like what we're watching is people forgetting who they are and forgetting their purpose and thinking that it comes into a space of judgment. And I think a lot of people feel hopeless too. And in that hopelessness, it makes them feel angry. And that anger then is like, adjudicated to the closest thing to them.
That's
like,
right.
it's like, oh, so now I'll make this judgment on you because that makes it feel like I'm being productive and I'm doing something about it.
Right.
And in reality, it's just adding to the noise. I got a friend who, she has a big heart. She's a really good person, but she's become so swept by what's happening in the world that, it's all she posts about. It's all she talks about. And now she's gotten to this place where, she says things like, I hate this world. Like, look at these people doing this. I hate the world. I hate people. I hate this. I hate that. And, we see it on the other end as well. But her anger around feeling hopelessness, around the love that she wants to be in the world, has now turned her into someone who's also what I call a hater. And so because of that, then she's remiss of the love that she could feel in her heart of the work that she wants to do or how she wants to connect. But instead has been inundated with the fear and the lack of empathy, and no one's listening to me. No one can hear. Why does no one else feel as urgent as I do about this particular thing? And, in my own mind, she's even come to me and been like, why aren't you saying anything? I was like, if you listen to my podcast, I've definitely said things. But I don't engage on social media in this way because I don't think it's beneficial. I've looked at the studies. I've done the research. People tend to be more ingratiated in their own opinion.
Correct.
Wherever they were originally standing. The only thing that changes is if people like or don't like their post, maybe then they'll start to think about it, but not necessarily if someone else said something. Correct. So I was like, I don't engage with this because I don't think it's beneficial.
And they're fueling the hate that they are so opposed to.
Yes.
I mean, myself included, I politically have difficulty with the side I don't agree with, but you're right that I want them to see more clearly, but my hate is only making their noise louder.
Right. Yeah, so totally. I have a friend who is, and obviously we're being super vague. We don't want to talk about, but I have another friend who I understand why he has that opinion. He comes culturally from that place, and family members have been killed, and like the whole thing. And I totally understand. And we had this discussion that ended up turning into kind of a fight because I wasn't in agreement with what he said about me, and he was coming from a triggered place. And I said, I never ever expect you to have a different opinion. Based on your lived experience, I don't expect you to have a different opinion. Based on your family and the systems that they've had to do to protect themselves and how they've had to believe for however long, like I understand why you feel this way, but I am entitled to my own opinion, and I'm entitled to this discussion, or like us having this discussion in a polite manner. And I value your friendship and you as a person enough to say, you know what, this is not something we need to talk about you anymore. At least, like, we have talked about our viewpoints. We've talked about why. I've said this is why, blah, blah, blah. And you've heard me out. You haven't changed your mind. I haven't changed my mind. So does that mean we can't be friends anymore? No.
Yeah.
Like, I highly disagree with you, but you're someone who's valuable to me and I still want to extend love to. Whereas like a few years back, like when Black Lives Matter, I lost a lot of friends because they didn't have the same viewpoint as me, as someone who's a person of color. And I was like, I don't really want to have people in my life who don't care about me, like care about the things that I care about. And while I stood there in that viewpoint then, and I was very engaged, very inundated, very like, this is what's right and what's, whatever, nothing changed. Like the polarity got worse.
Exactly.
And like, and I'm not saying that like activism and things don't work. I'm not saying that at all. There are places and ways to do that where it is definitely appropriate. But between my interpersonal friendships, Like there are definitely times where like, well, it depends on what they say. People say certain things where I'm like, okay, well, we're not in alignment anymore frequency wise. And what you bring to my life now is a lot of stress and a lot of hate and a lot of this. So, we're just going to, that might be a natural parting of ways, but not because I hate you, but because I love you enough not to be in this position where we're in constant tension.
Yep.
So like that person that I mentioned earlier is not really a part of my life in a very active way anymore, because we have very divergent views on things, but it doesn't mean that I'm not sending them love or sending their family love. They just had a baby and I'm sending them flowers, like things like that. I can still be in the space of love and know that like if you're not serving me in this way, I don't have to hate you.
That's right.
You're right.
I just don't have to be around you all the time.
You're right.
That's right.
You're right.
Wow. Well, Miss Lovely, I mean, do you not have the perfect last name? We love you.
It's my middle name.
Is it?
Oh my gosh.
Oh, well, we love you. You have really brought so much light. Can you just tell us quickly, beyond reading and ordering Meaningful Manifestation and listening to Spiritual Shit, which is an amazing podcast.
Thank you.
How can people find you? Can they book sessions? What's the best way for them to get connected?
You can find me everywhere at thelovelyalia.com. That's where I hang out on Instagram as well. I provide coaching and sessions, and we're starting a mystery school next year. I had mystery school before, and I found a better way to run it. So we're going to start that next year. That's going to be really fun. But yeah, you can find all my good stuff, even my book, on thelovelyalia.com.
Well, we wish you so much. Good
really,
fortune
truly.
with this book and everything you're putting out into the world. You are clearly right on purpose, and we're so grateful.
100%.
You nailed it so much.
Yes. Thank you for joining us today, guys. Thank you for listening. And as always, I know you're enlightened by this episode, so share it because your friends and family deserve to be enlightened.
Everyone needs to hear it.
Too. We will see you all next week with another episode. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.